Good evening. You've arrived at a quiet place meant for rest. There is nothing you need to do here, nothing you need to solve, nothing you need to remember. This is a calm science story, told slowly and designed to remain in the background as you rest. You don't need to listen closely. You don't need to follow each sentence. If your attention drifts, that's completely fine. Right now, your body is already doing what it knows how to do. Breathing continues on its own. The surface beneath you is supporting your weight without effort. There is no instruction to follow and no improvement required. Tonight's focus is simple. It's about snow and about the quiet that often comes with it. Not as an image to hold on to, not as a scene to imagine in detail, but as a set of slow, steady processes that don't require attention. Everything you'll hear is based on well-established scientific understanding, observations that have been measured, tested, and repeated over time. Nothing speculative, nothing meant to surprise. The information will be shared gently, without urgency, without emphasis. Because nothing here is happening quickly, and nothing here depends on you staying alert. If you fall asleep at any point, that's expected. If you wake later and hear a few words, that's fine too. This story doesn't rely on sequence. It doesn't build toward a conclusion. It simply continues at a steady pace. You may notice moments of silence between phrases. Those pauses are intentional. They're part of the rhythm, allowing the nervous system to settle without being asked to do anything at all. There is no need to picture snow clearly, no need to imagine cold or temperature or landscape. If images appear on their own, they can pass just as easily. What matters more is the feeling of consistency, of nothing changing suddenly, of no signal that requires a response. For now, all that matters is that you're here, resting. Listening if you want to, not listening if you don't. The quiet science will unfold softly in the background, slowly, evenly, just as it always does. As you continue resting, there's no need to adjust your position unless your body naturally wants to. If you're already comfortable, you can let stillness remain. Breathing is happening on its own. You don't need to change it. You don't need to slow it down or make it deeper. Each breath arrives and then leaves without effort. The body doesn't need guidance right now. It responds best when nothing is being asked of it. You might notice the muscles in your face beginning to soften, the small muscles around the eyes, the jaw resting without being held in place, the tongue settling naturally in the mouth. There is nothing to release deliberately, nothing to relax on command. The nervous system knows how to move toward rest when the environment remains quiet and predictable. The shoulders may feel heavy, not pulled downward, just supported, as if gravity is doing what it has always done, evenly, without urgency. Your arms are where they are. They don't need to be positioned perfectly. They don't need symmetry. They are simply present, resting along with the rest of your body. If there is any remaining tension, it doesn't need to disappear. It can remain exactly as it is. The body doesn't require total relaxation in order to rest. It only needs safety and time. Your chest rises and falls at a pace that suits you. The rhythm may change slightly from moment to moment. That's normal. Breathing adjusts continuously without asking for permission. Lower in the body, the abdomen moves gently with each breath. There is no need to hold it in, no need to control it. It responds naturally to pressure and release. Your legs are supported by the surface beneath you. Their weight is already being carried. There is nothing to keep upright, nothing to balance. The knees can remain as they are, the calves, the ankles, the feet. The feet don't need attention. They don't need warmth or tingling or any particular sensation. They can simply exist at the far end of the body, quiet, unremarkable. As these sensations remain steady, the brain begins to notice the lack of demand. There is no task, no response required, no change expected. This is often when mental activity starts to slow, not because it's being forced to, but because there is nothing pressing to react to. Thoughts may still appear, fragments of the day, images, unfinished sentences. They don't need to be pushed away. They don't need to be followed. They can pass through the mind the same way sounds pass through a quiet room, present for a moment, then gone. If your attention drifts away from these words, that's completely fine. The body doesn't need continuous input. It responds just as well to consistency and tone. The voice you're hearing isn't here to guide you somewhere specific. It's here to remain steady, allowing your internal systems to settle at their own pace. There's nowhere else to be, nothing else to prepare for. The night doesn't require readiness. You can continue resting exactly as you are, breathing, supported, unchanged. The body already knows how to do this. As the body remains settled, attention often becomes less focused on specific sensations. It begins to open into a more general sense of steadiness. There is no clear boundary between being awake and resting deeply. Instead, there is a gradual shift, one that happens quietly, without announcement. In the natural world, many environments function this way. They don't change all at once. They move slowly, in small adjustments that are easy to overlook. Evening light fades without a precise moment when day becomes night. Sound often softens gradually as activity decreases and distance feels larger. Temperature shifts in small increments, not sudden steps. These changes don't require coordination. They don't respond to observation. They unfold whether or not anyone is paying attention. The human nervous system is familiar with this kind of rhythm. It developed within environments shaped by repetition and slow variation, not by constant alertness or rapid change. Because of that, predictable surroundings tend to feel safe. They don't demand quick reactions. They don't signal urgency. From a scientific perspective, this matters. When the environment provides fewer changes to track, the brain has less information to process. Fewer signals compete for attention. Fewer decisions are required. Over time, this reduction allows activity to settle naturally, not because anything is being controlled, but because there is nothing new to respond to. Quiet environments often share this quality. They are not defined by complete silence. Instead, they are defined by consistency. Sound remains at a similar level. Light does not shift abruptly. Movement, if present at all, is slow and predictable. In these conditions, the nervous system does not need to stay prepared. There is no expectation of sudden change, no signal that something important is about to happen. This is why environments with fewer variations are often associated with rest. The brain responds to patterns that repeat without surprise. It relaxes its monitoring when outcomes feel stable. The body does not need instructions to recognize this. It responds automatically, adjusting its internal pace to match what is happening around it. As attention softens, details become less important. Individual sounds blend into a background. Moments no longer need to be measured. Time itself can feel less structured. Minutes do not need to be counted. There is no sequence to follow. The voice continues steadily, not to hold focus, but to provide a consistent reference point. Something predictable enough that awareness does not need to remain sharp. This kind of listening does not require effort. It does not require understanding. It simply remains present, allowing internal systems to slow in their own way. In the next moments, the focus will move gently outward, from the body to the environment, to conditions that naturally support quiet and steadiness. There is no need to anticipate that shift. It will happen gradually, at the same unhurried pace everything else has followed. Nothing here requires attention, and nothing needs to change. As attention rests more easily, it becomes possible to notice how certain environments support quiet, simply by how they behave. Snow is one of those environments. From a scientific point of view, snow is not a special substance. It is water in a solid state arranged in a particular way. What makes it distinctive is not what it is made of, but how it forms and how it moves. Snow begins as water vapor in the atmosphere. Under specific conditions, that vapor changes directly into ice, forming small crystalline structures. These structures grow slowly, layer by layer, as more water molecules attach. This process does not happen quickly. It depends on temperature, moisture, and air movement. Small variations lead to slightly different shapes, but the underlying process remains the same. Each snow crystal forms independently. There is no coordination between them, no shared timing. They appear one by one, following the same physical rules, repeating the same basic pattern. Once formed, snowflakes fall toward the ground. They fall slowly, not because they are light in a meaningful way, but because their shape creates resistance as they move through air. Air pushes back gently. The motion is gradual. There is no sudden acceleration. From moment to moment, the position of a falling snowflake changes only slightly. The path is continuous, predictable. This slow movement is important. Systems that change gradually tend to feel stable. There is no need to track them closely. When snow reaches the ground, it does not behave as a single object. It accumulates as a collection of small pieces, loosely arranged, with air trapped between them. This structure remains uneven. Spaces form naturally. Nothing is pressed into place all at once. Over time, snow settles, not abruptly, but through tiny adjustments that occur as weight redistributes. Each adjustment is small enough to go unnoticed. The surface remains mostly the same from one moment to the next. In physics, this kind of behavior is common in systems that are not being disturbed. When external forces are minimal, change happens slowly. Energy moves gently, without sharp transitions. Snow does not require maintenance to remain where it is. It stays because conditions allow it to stay. Temperature remains low enough. Movement remains limited. There is no effort involved in holding its form. This stability is temporary, but not fragile. As long as conditions remain similar, the structure persists. From a distance, snow-covered environments often appear uniform, but this uniformity does not come from precision. It comes from repetition. The same simple process happens many times over. Water vapor becomes ice. Ice accumulates. Accumulation settles. Nothing needs to be directed. Nothing needs to be corrected. Because of this, snow-covered landscapes change very little from minute to minute. The absence of rapid change reduces the number of signals the brain needs to process. There is no pattern demanding attention, no variation that suggests something new is beginning. This is one reason snow is often associated with quiet, not because it creates silence, but because it removes interruption. The environment becomes simpler, fewer movements, fewer contrasts. In such conditions, awareness does not need to scan constantly. There is nothing to anticipate. The body responds to this lack of demand without being instructed to do so. Internal rhythms adjust naturally when external rhythms slow. Snow, as a physical system, does not create calm. It allows calm by remaining consistent. It follows the same rules continuously. Those rules do not change from one moment to the next. As long as conditions stay within a narrow range, the system remains stable. And stability reduces the need for attention. There is no need to imagine the details of this process. No need to picture individual crystals or surfaces. It is enough to recognize that the environment behaves in a steady way. Slow, predictable, unchanged. The science itself does not require focus. It does not build toward complexity. It simply describes how matter behaves when energy moves gently and conditions remain consistent. That steadiness will continue to be present in the background, not as something to think about, but as a reference point. In the next part, attention will move toward another quality often noticed in snowy environments, not as an experience, but as a physical effect. There's no need to prepare for that shift. It will unfold gradually, at the same pace everything else has followed. Nothing here needs to be held in mind. Nothing needs to be understood. As conditions remain steady, another effect often becomes noticeable. Not immediately, and not because anything new has happened. Sound behaves differently in snowy environments. This is not because snow creates silence. Sound is still present. Movement still exists. Air still carries vibration. What changes is how sound travels. From a physical perspective, sound moves as waves through air. Those waves reflect, scatter, and return when they encounter hard surfaces, walls, ground, buildings. When sound reflects back toward its source, it creates echoes and overlapping signals. These reflections add complexity. They increase the amount of information the brain receives. Snow-covered ground behaves differently. Fresh snow is made of many small ice crystals arranged loosely, with air trapped between them. This structure does not reflect sound efficiently. Instead, it absorbs a portion of the sound energy. As sound waves enter the snow, they lose strength. The vibration is scattered and reduced. Less energy returns to the air. Because of this, fewer reflections reach the listener. Echoes are softened. Sharp edges in sound become less defined. The result is not the absence of sound, but a reduction in contrast. Distant noises may seem farther away. Nearby sounds feel less sharp. The overall sound environment becomes more uniform. This uniformity matters. When sound levels remain consistent, the brain receives fewer changes to track. There are fewer sudden shifts, fewer interruptions. From moment to moment, the auditory environment remains predictable. In scientific terms, environments with fewer acoustic reflections produce lower auditory complexity. There are fewer overlapping signals, less variation in intensity. This reduction does not require conscious awareness to have an effect. The nervous system responds automatically. When sound behaves in a stable way, there is less need to stay alert. No sudden noise needs to be anticipated. No rapid adjustment is required. This is why snowy environments are often described as quiet, not because they eliminate sound, but because they reduce its impact. The brain does not need to separate foreground from background as actively. Everything blends more easily. Over time, this blending allows attention to soften. Individual sounds lose their importance. They no longer signal change. They simply pass through. This effect becomes more noticeable when snow is fresh, before surfaces harden, before ice forms. Loose snow absorbs more sound than compacted snow. Air trapped between crystals plays a role in this absorption. Again, this is not a dramatic process. It does not happen suddenly. It unfolds gradually as snow accumulates and remains undisturbed. As long as the surface stays uneven and soft, sound continues to be dampened. There is no effort involved in maintaining this effect. No system needs to be adjusted. No input is required. The physical structure of snow does the work on its own. In environments like this, the absence of sharp sound cues reduces the need for orientation. The brain does not need to ask where a sound came from or what it means. Nothing is demanding interpretation. This allows internal rhythms to slow further. Breathing remains steady. Muscle tone remains low. The body does not need to prepare for response. Silence, in this context, is not an object. It is a condition created by reduced reflection and reduced contrast. And because this condition remains stable, it does not draw attention to itself. There is no signal announcing that the environment has changed, no cue that something is about to happen. Sound continues to exist, but it does not intrude. The science behind this does not require focus. It follows simple physical principles that repeat consistently. Snow absorbs sound. Fewer reflections return. The environment becomes acoustically simpler. This simplicity supports rest without effort. There is no need to imagine specific sounds or places, no need to picture landscapes or scenes. It is enough to recognize that fewer changes are occurring, that nothing is competing for attention. This effect remains in place as long as conditions remain similar. And while it remains, the environment continues to support quiet. In the next section, attention will move toward temperature and structure, not to introduce new ideas, but to stay with the same slow patterns. There is no need to follow that shift closely. It will happen gradually, just as everything else has. Nothing here requires attention. The process continues quietly. As sound remains softened, temperature becomes another steady condition in the background, not something that needs to be noticed closely, just a constant influence, present without drawing attention. In snowy environments, temperature tends to change slowly, not because it never shifts, but because large changes require time. Cold air holds less energy. Movement at the molecular level is reduced. As a result, many processes happen more gradually. Snow responds to these conditions in predictable ways. Once it has settled on the ground, its structure changes slowly. The spaces between ice crystals adjust over time. Edges soften. Surfaces become more uniform. This is not a single event. It is a continuous process made up of very small changes. Pressure from above causes snow to compress slightly, not all at once, but incrementally as weight redistributes. At the same time, temperature influences how ice crystals rearrange. Some connections weaken, others strengthen. These adjustments occur quietly. They do not produce noticeable motion from one moment to the next. they are only visible over longer periods. From a scientific standpoint, this kind of gradual change is common in cold systems. Lower energy environments tend to evolve slowly. They resist sudden transitions. Because of this, snowy surfaces often remain consistent for long stretches of time. Their appearance does not shift rapidly. Their structure does not demand attention. This consistency reduces the number of signals the nervous system needs to monitor. There is no indication that something requires immediate response, no sharp contrast suggesting instability. The environment feels settled because it is settled. Even when change does occur, it unfolds gently. Snow may compact slightly. It may become smoother. It may respond to small variations in temperature. But these responses are not abrupt. They follow the same physical rules continuously. Nothing needs to be corrected. Nothing needs to be managed. The system adjusts on its own, guided by simple constraints: temperature, pressure, time. These constraints do not vary from moment to moment. They remain within a narrow range. When external conditions remain stable, internal change slows naturally. This applies not only to snow, but to many physical systems. When energy input is low and constant, processes settle into predictable patterns. There is no urgency in such systems, no acceleration toward an outcome. They persist by remaining within limits. Snow does not hurry to transform. It does not rush to melt or disappear when temperatures remain low. It stays in place, adjusting quietly. This slow pace matters. The brain responds differently to environments where change is gradual. When variations are small, attention does not need to stay engaged. Monitoring becomes unnecessary. The body mirrors this pattern. Muscle tone remains low. Breathing remains steady. There is no need to prepare for sudden shifts. Over time, awareness becomes less focused on individual details. It begins to rest in the overall steadiness of the environment. Temperature remains consistent. Structure remains stable. Change, if present at all, remains slow. There is no need to follow the specifics of these processes. No need to track how snow compacts or how crystals rearrange. It is enough to recognize that nothing is happening quickly. The science does not add complexity here. It simply describes why the environment behaves the way it does. Low energy, gradual adjustment, predictable patterns. These conditions remain in place without effort. As they do, attention can soften further. The environment continues to support quiet without asking anything in return. In the next section, the focus will remain with repetition, not to introduce new ideas, but to stay with what continues, unchanged. There is no need to anticipate that movement. It will arrive gently, at the same unhurried pace everything else has followed. Nothing here needs to be understood. Nothing needs to be remembered. As conditions remain steady, repetition becomes easier to notice. Not as an event, but as a pattern that continues without interruption. Snowy environments tend to repeat themselves. From one moment to the next, very little changes. Light remains soft. Sound remains muted. Temperature remains within a narrow range. The same conditions return again and again. Snow may fall for a time, then pause, then return later. There is no clear beginning or ending to this cycle. It does not build toward a peak It does not announce itself. It simply repeats. When snow rests on the ground, its appearance remains largely the same. The surface looks familiar, predictable. From minute to minute, there is no reason to look again. Nothing new is revealed. This lack of variation matters. Repetition reduces the need for comparison. The brain does not need to ask what has changed. There is nothing to update. In environments like this, attention naturally loosens its grip. The same sounds, if present at all, return at similar levels. The same quiet remains. There are no sudden contrasts, no sharp edges that demand focus. Day follows night. Night follows day. Snow accumulates slowly, or remains as it is. If it changes, the change is subtle enough to go unnoticed. This kind of repetition is common in natural systems that are not being disturbed. When external forces remain stable, outcomes repeat. There is no requirement to monitor closely, no advantage in staying alert. The nervous system responds to this consistency without effort. It begins to expect that nothing urgent will occur. Expectations soften. This does not require conscious recognition. It happens automatically, beneath awareness. As repetition continues, individual details lose importance. They no longer stand out. What remains is the overall pattern, steady, unbroken. Snow does not interrupt itself. It does not introduce sudden variation without cause. The environment continues in the same way it has been. This predictability allows internal rhythms to slow further. Breathing remains even. Muscle activity remains low. The body does not need to prepare for change. Over time, repetition creates familiarity, and familiarity reduces vigilance. There is nothing to wait for, nothing to anticipate. The same conditions remain in place. Snow remains on the ground. Temperature remains low. Sound remains softened. These statements could be repeated many times without losing accuracy. They remain true whether or not they are noticed. As repetition continues, meaning begins to fade. Words become less important. The rhythm remains. This is not something that needs to be followed. It can happen without awareness. The environment does not require attention in order to continue behaving this way. The repetition is enough. In the next part, there will be a point where following becomes unnecessary. Not because something ends, but because nothing new begins. There is no need to stay alert for that moment. It will not announce itself. The same steady rhythm will continue, just as it has. Nothing here depends on attention. The process remains unchanged. By now, there is no need to keep track of what has already been said. Nothing here depends on remembering details. Nothing is building toward a conclusion. The patterns described continue whether or not they are followed. Snow remains where it is. Temperature stays within the same range. Sound continues to behave in the same softened way. These conditions do not change suddenly. They do not respond to attention. They remain steady on their own. Repetition is intentional. When information stops changing, the brain no longer needs to stay alert. It does not need to monitor for novelty. There is nothing new to prepare for. From this point on, there will be no new ideas introduced, no additional concepts to follow. The rhythm will remain the same. Words may still be heard, but they do not need to be interpreted. They can pass through without forming clear meaning. The body remains supported. Breathing continues at its own pace. Nothing has shifted abruptly. The environment is unchanged. There is no signal that something important is about to happen. No cue that requires attention. This is a point of permission. Permission to stop listening closely. Permission to stop following sentences. Permission to let the voice become part of the background. There is no advantage in staying awake for what comes next. The science does not become more detailed. The pace does not increase. Nothing new is added. Everything continues as it has been. If sleep arrives now, nothing is missed. The processes being described do not move toward an ending. They repeat, they continue. If awareness fades, it fades naturally. If it returns briefly later, it can drift again just as easily. There is no correct way to experience this moment. Some nights, rest arrives quickly. Other nights, it arrives in stages. Both are normal. The body does not need instruction. The mind does not need reassurance. The steady rhythm is enough. The voice remains consistent. Its tone does not change. It does not ask to be followed. From here on, information density remains low. Meaning becomes less important than rhythm. The story does not progress forward in the way stories usually do. It simply stays. And in that steadiness, sleep has room to settle, quietly, without effort, and without needing to be noticed at all. Time in winter often feels different, not because it moves more slowly, but because there is less pressure to measure it. In snowy conditions, change tends to unfold over long periods. Hours pass with little visible difference. Days may feel similar to one another. Snow remains in place. It does not rush to transform. It stays as it is until conditions shift enough for change to occur. This persistence is not unusual. It reflects how physical systems behave when energy input remains low. Temperature stays within a narrow range. Light changes gradually. Sound remains muted. Because these conditions repeat, the passage of time becomes less defined. There is no clear marker that separates one moment from the next, no event that signals progression. From a scientific perspective, this is expected. Systems governed by slow processes do not produce sharp transitions. Winter landscapes often accumulate change quietly. Snow builds layer by layer. Each addition is small. Individually, these layers are insignificant. Over time, they form a stable whole. This kind of accumulation does not demand attention. It does not need to be tracked. The same is true for the gradual settling that follows. Snow compresses slightly. Structures adjust. But these changes remain subtle. They do not announce themselves. On a short time scale, nothing appears to be happening. On a longer time scale, change is occurring continuously. Both can be true at the same time. The brain does not need to resolve this. It does not need to decide which view is correct. When there is no urgency, time does not need to be organized. Minutes do not need to be counted. Sequences do not need to be followed. The environment offers no deadlines, no signals that something must happen next. In winter conditions, waiting does not feel like waiting. It simply feels like remaining. Snow remains on the ground. Temperature remains low. Sound remains soft. These statements remain accurate over long periods. As time passes in this way, awareness can loosen further. There is nothing to anticipate, nothing to prepare for. The body responds by conserving energy. Muscle activity stays low. Breathing remains even. The nervous system recognizes the absence of demand. There is no reason to stay alert when nothing is changing quickly. Long timescales do not require engagement. They unfold whether or not they are noticed. Snow does not need attention to continue behaving as it does. Neither does the environment as a whole. The process remains steady. As this sense of duration continues, details become less distinct. Moments blend together. The science behind this does not need to be recalled. It does not require understanding. It simply describes how systems behave when conditions remain stable. Low energy, slow accumulation, minimal variation. These principles remain in place. Time continues without emphasis, without markers, without urgency. Nothing here depends on awareness. The night continues. The environment remains unchanged. The process carries on quietly. Nothing in the environment has changed. Snow remains where it is. Temperature stays within the same range. Sound continues to be softened. There is no shift in direction, no increase in pace, no signal that requires attention. The same conditions are still in place. These patterns repeat because they are stable, and stability does not need effort. Snow does not need to be held in position. It stays because the conditions allow it to stay. Sound does not need to be reduced. It remains quiet because surfaces continue to absorb it. Temperature does not need to be managed. It stays consistent because energy remains low. Nothing is being adjusted. Nothing is being corrected. The environment continues without interruption. Breathing continues on its own. There is no need to notice it. The body remains supported. There is nothing to hold upright. If thoughts appear, they do not need to be examined. They can pass without being followed. If awareness drifts, it does not need to return. The voice remains present. Its role does not change. There is no new information to process, nothing to remember. The rhythm remains the same. Snow remains. Sound remains. Temperature remains. These statements do not become less true with repetition. They can be heard or not heard. Either way, nothing changes. The story does not move forward. It does not build toward an ending. It simply maintains the same steady pattern. This is often where listening becomes effortless, where words lose their edges, where meaning softens into tone. Nothing important is happening, and that is enough. The environment does not react to attention. It continues as it always has. The night does not ask for participation. It allows rest. There is no need to follow this any further. The steady repetition is sufficient. Everything that matters is already in place. The rhythm continues. Nothing shifts. Nothing resolves. Snow remains in place. Temperature remains steady. Sound stays softened. There is no marker for time passing, no clear boundary between moments. The voice remains present, but it does not ask to be followed. Words arrive, then fade. Sentences do not need to complete themselves. The space between them is enough. Breathing continues on its own. There is no need to notice it. The body stays supported. Nothing needs to be held or adjusted. If sleep has already arrived, The story continues without needing to be heard. If awareness returns briefly, it can drift again just as easily. Nothing here depends on attention. The processes being described do not change when they are not observed. They do not slow down or speed up. They continue at the same pace they always have. There is no conclusion waiting, no final thought to reach. The night does not move toward an ending. It simply unfolds. The repetition remains gentle. The tone remains even. There is no reason to stay awake for what comes next. The words are no longer carrying information. They are only carrying rhythm. That rhythm does not need to be understood. It can remain quietly in the background, like distant motion, like slow cycles that do not announce themselves. Nothing more is required. The night continues, the quiet remains, and the process carries itself forward.